This is just a little intermission to tell you guys that most of part 2 is shot on a completely different day. And I try to keep everything as smooth as possible by controlling the lighting, by, table placement, microphone placement, all for the sake of continuity. And as some of you guys may be able to tell, I did get my first set of earrings. And, my hair should be looking a little less flat, so it should boost my confidence a little bit for this session. Well, all right, let's get into it. Number 3 on biggest things I learned in my 20s is to bet on yourself. I think the biggest contributor to unhappiness in most people, especially nowadays, is just the amount of insecurities that we all have. I know it's a cliche, but this is definitely perpetuated by social media. On one end, we have these standards for both genders that are totally unrealistic. For guys, we have this idea of you have to be this certain height, you have to be this certain build, you have to have this much success, you got to be making this much money. And for women, it's are you having kids by this time? Do you look like this? Are you too skinny? Are you too fat? On the other end, you have toxic positivity, where we're told that we should be happy and motivated and driven 24/7. And when we live in these social media worlds, that is what we perceive as reality. And that's fucking damaging. What you gotta remember is that everything on social media is curated to what they want you to see, right? So you have these influencers that are posing in private jets or in front of limos, or you see that this family is extremely happy all the time. Every picture is a masterpiece. Every picture is them looking happy. And just remember, I know we all know this deep down, but just remember that it's all selected. It's all handpicked. Nobody is like that all the time. So don't let that get you down. I know this section is called betting on yourself, but one of the biggest things that hold us back from chasing our potential and being the best that we can be is that we feel like it's an endless chase. It feels like it's a race that we cannot win. So most of us, we just give up. So if you feel like I just called you out right there, what I will say is that, I've been through that feeling so many different times in my life. Even nowadays, it's insecurities are never going to go away completely, but you have to look at it realistically. Nobody's life is as perfect as you think. Everybody struggles with stuff, and don't let that hold you back. Keep investing in yourself and move forward. So here are some tips on how to keep believing and keep betting on yourself. The first one that I got is very straightforward, and that's to invest in your physical and mental health. So I think the physical aspect is a little bit more obvious. It includes stuff like brushing your teeth, working out, running, eating well, stuff like that. And so the mental part includes things such as social groups, meditation, your relationship with your family and your spouse, having a close support system, having a therapist. Having good physical and mental health is essential in building a foundation for everything else. Number 2, have goals, have vision, and chase them. I'm going to use an example that's pretty relevant to this video. So a couple months ago, I had this crazy idea. That in a few months' time, I'll start a video podcast, right? Jot this down. Someone get this down. A video podcast where I would talk about the struggles of young adult life. At that moment, I saw the lights, I saw the camera, I saw the table, I saw my set, I saw this. The reason why this is so important is because there are countless times in my life where I didn't have vision, where I had this ambition, I had these vague dreams of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. But I gave up on them because the end destination wasn't real for me. And so I kept chasing an idea instead of chasing something that I could see, something that I could touch. And so with vision out of the way, we have discipline, right? And discipline is a little bit more concrete. It's a little bit more easy to understand because generally it's this schedule and this routine that you build for yourself. Discipline is extremely important because the alternative is relying on willpower. And as most of you know, willpower is an extremely limited resource. The way that I see it and what I tell other people is that willpower is for the battles, discipline is for the wars. The fourth one I got is to know your strengths and your weaknesses. So I'm not going to get too in depth with this one. I do feel like it's a little bit more straightforward. But I do want to remind you to know and to remember your strengths, because that is your main source of confidence. On the other end, you got to be able to identify and to be comfortable, at least at the moment, with those weaknesses, because that's where most of your insecurities are going to come from. And just remember that if you work on these weaknesses, one day they can become your biggest strengths. For my fourth main point, expand your perspective. So we've all been through those situations where we would go into an argument with somebody for 30 or 45 minutes, maybe even a couple hours. And, even though we put our best foot forward, we would bring our best points. We would use different persuasion techniques. And it just seems like they would just never understand our side of the story. The worst is when it feels like they don't want to understand you. Eventually, we learn to tell ourselves that this conversation isn't going to go much further. This person is probably stupid as hell, and life goes on. But of course, the real problem is when you're going through these situations, but now it's not a stranger. Now it's not just somebody you just met. Now we're talking about family or close friends or your significant other. And these situations are so much harder because you want to understand these people and you want them to understand you. And because we have this double-edged sword that we call emotion, sometimes it's just hard to see from another perspective. Here's my advice for expanding your perspective. Number one, understand people and how they think. This one's the foundation for everything because we're all born different. We all have different personalities. And I think the most important thing is that we all have different life experiences that shape us to become who we are. So because I was a former actor, I do want to use that as a hypothetical scenario. In this hypothetical situation, we have an aspiring actor we'll call Ming. And Ming exists in two parallel universes. In this universe, he goes through years and years of setbacks and failures and rejection. And then one day, after all this grind, he lands his big Marvel film, baby. Fast forward, movie releases. He's now this big international star. He's making all this money. He has all this recognition, and he's getting more acting gigs. And after all of that, this kid from the little known city of Fuzhou wins the Oscars. And then he goes on stage and he's thanking his family, his mentors, his 4 wives, his personal chef, and blah, blah, blah. But you know that in that speech, he's going to mention that you have to keep pushing forward and you have to keep pursuing your dreams and never give up. And you can't really blame him because that all paid off for him. But let's go back now to the same guy, but now in parallel universe number 2. And his story starts the same way. He also goes through years and years and years of failure. But one day, he auditions for that same role that his counterpart in the first universe auditioned for. In this universe, he has a different set of casting directors, and they're not impressed by his performance. So he leaves the auditioning room. He's not sweating too much about it because nobody really expects to get a role like that anyways. And he goes back home, recuperates, and continues grinding. Let's fast forward. He's now 50 years old, and for the past 30 years, he's been chasing this dream, having to work 2 jobs to support himself, and his career never really took off. This version of him is much less likely to encourage people to chase their passions and to continue working hard on your dreams because it didn't work out for him. I think this story is effective because it takes the same person who has the same drives, the same dreams, the same ambitions, and yet they end up with 2 totally different mindsets by the end of the story because of their own life experiences. This is why it's extremely important to try to understand where people came from and their life experiences, because that kind of stuff really does drive your actions for the future. So my challenge to you is to go out there and just meet new people and interact with people that you typically wouldn't talk to. If you have the money to do it, go out there and go travel to another state, another country, another continent, because that's the type of stuff that will grow your perspective. Number 2, be open to change. I think the big problem is that people need a big reason to change. To change yourself in a positive way takes a lot of willpower and discipline. The first step is that we have to identify that there's a problem to begin with. After that, we have to decide if that problem is worth solving. And then after that, we have to figure out how to solve that problem, how to actually change, and if it's worth putting in all that effort. And if you get through those 2 initial hurdles, then the last step is to finally implement that change. On paper, all of that is very simple. But in real life, it's extremely difficult. It's very hard because a lot of us get too comfortable. And we have this very high threshold of how much shit we're willing to put up with before we decide that something needs to happen. So next time you do try to persuade somebody and it seems like they're not budging or they're hesitant to take any actions, just understand that it is very difficult to get people to change. There's a quote out there that goes something to the effect of, think how hard it is to change yourself, and now think how much harder it would be to change another person. Have that as a reminder for others and for yourself. My third and final piece of advice on this is to be comfortable knowing that you won't always be understood. So I like to think of myself as a very rational, logical type of person. And whenever I try to persuade somebody my points and it's not getting through to them, I get very, very frustrated. Growing up as a teenager, this situation was really hard for me because I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the experience or the maturity to be able to effectively deal with problems like that. And most of the time, I would take those rejections personally. And that's not even considering if I'm right or wrong. But I'm older now. And I'm wiser. I'm a little bit more humble. And I've just learned not to take these rejections of my ideas personally, because that's only going to hold me back. Not everybody is going to understand you right now. And some people never will. But that's cool. Because as long as you're growing and you're expanding your knowledge and expanding your perspective, you're doing the best that you can, baby. My last and final main point is to live in the present. I think we've all been in that situation where life isn't going our way, so we mentally crawl back into the past. And usually when that happens, there are 2 main scenarios. In the first scenario, we kind of ride that wave of sadness and just think of other unhappy times. So let's just say you're going through a breakup, which is already a very difficult situation. And of course, no better time for your brain to remind you of another past breakup. Yo, dude, I know you're a little bit busy right now, being depressed or whatever. Don't you remember Nicole? Damn, you really fucked that one up, huh? And now you're just swimming in this sadness of both the past and the present. And you feel this hopelessness. And situations like this usually don't happen in a vacuum. They tend to come back and back and back again. And you have this feeling that things are just going to happen over and over again. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's pull back a little bit and talk about that second scenario. In scenario 2, you're still sad, but now you're thinking about happier times. You're thinking about the good old days. In this scenario, you're still going through the breakup, but this time you're thinking about the great memories that you guys shared and how they're never going to come back. So you start reminding yourself and telling yourself, we were so happy at this time, or I was on top of the world when we were doing this. In those moments, you think of specific times and specific places with that specific person, and you feel like you need those specifics back in your life for you to be happy. I feel like in those times, we think that way because a part of us craves that familiarity. We need, or we feel like we need that comfortability. We idealize that relationship and forget that we're in this situation because things weren't perfect. I'm gonna try to lighten up the mood a little bit by giving you my takes on how this could be better. My first piece of advice is to have less expectation and more flexibility. It's not a surprise to anybody that life is unpredictable. As kids, we kind of have some crazy expectations, right? We kind of expected our parents to get us every and everything, and we expected all of our friends to show up to our birthday parties. We expected to be successful when we were adults. But as we grow older, we start to realize how unpredictable life is, and that if you can't adapt, you're going to be swept away. I think it's extremely important to have foundations and pillars for yourself of things that you will not change. I'm talking about things like loyalty, empathy, compassion, self-respect. These are all things that you should retain. As I stated in part 1, I'm a little bit of an introvert. For the longest time, I've just accepted that was who I was. And so I would always be in my comfort zone. I would never go out. I would always only talk to family and close friends. Having a mindset like that was okay when I was in grade school. But the older I get, the more I realize how important it was to improve your social health and to grow these connections and build these relationships with people. And of course, the social part is extremely important. But I feel like something that's overlooked is how powerful networking and knowing people and having these connections can actually be. If you were to go back in time and ask my 13-year-old self if I would ever be excited to meet new people, be excited to take risks, and to go on dates and get fucked up at parties, I would have told you that there was no chance in hell. But again, life is unpredictable. And if I didn't have that flexibility, or if I kept clinging on to these expectations of who I thought I was, then I wouldn't have had these opportunities. I wouldn't have met half these people that I love and care for today. And I wouldn't have grown into the person that I am. And number 2, I have learned to forgive. So like some of my other points, this one is pretty straightforward. I'm going to break this one down into 2 parts. The first part is to forgive others. Most of us have no problem forgiving small things, like if somebody forgot your name or if a waitress forgot what you ordered. My advice is focused on actions that you would deem unforgivable. And this is kind of a crazy concept, right? Because how can you forgive something that you think is unforgivable? And so I'll answer that with a question. What is the alternative? The alternative to that is to cling on that negative energy for the rest of your life. And that in some way will slowly kill you. It's one of those things that will take time and it will take effort. And that brings me to the second part, which is to learn to forgive yourself and to forgive for yourself. These things take a lot of time and a lot of effort because you're dealing with powerful emotions. If they wronged you and they feel no remorse, forgive them. Forgive them for yourself. And if it was you that wronged them, admit your mistakes. Accept your mistakes and forgive yourself. Because life moves on. My last and final piece of advice is to accept the past and fight for the future. I'm going to end it with something as straightforward as that. At the end of the day, the universe does not care who's right and who's wrong. The past is already written, and none of us can change it. The future is unscripted. But the actions that you take today are your tools to write that future. Make it happen. Alright guys, just finished shooting everything, and I want to personally thank each and every one of you for watching and for making it this far. I know these videos are long. These take me probably to shoot everything, I'd say maybe like 14 hours, give or take. I'm trying to improve my podcasting skills, communication and build my charisma and everything. And it's difficult. But with the power of editing, I try to make it as smooth as possible. This whole thing was a learning experience. You know what I mean? I've never built a set before. So as you can see behind me, I have to show you what each one of these items are once I start releasing a couple more videos. Got this whole thing painted and everything. Didn't do it myself. I had a lot of help, and I wanted to thank those people as well. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I've learned for the first time, such as that setting up the studio lights. I've never done that before, and even though I am an amateur photographer, I kind of specialize in like the portrait stuff outside, so I've never needed these studio lights before. And I know the lighting on my face is a little bit harsh. I can't pinpoint exactly why it is yet because I don't know enough yet, but I promise you I will look way better for the next one. My hair will probably look a little bit better, and I'll be a little bit smoother because with more experience, the better I get, honestly. My editing is getting better. My flow is getting better. Just everything. So if you guys enjoyed watching this today, I invite you personally to come with me and join me on this journey because I ain't stopping anytime soon. And there's a lot of things that I do want to share. And hey, you're free to tag along. So let's do it and let's make it happen, baby.